Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of United Way for Southeastern Michigan's What's the Word Wednesday, where we share important resources and have vibrant discussions about the topics that matter most to you. My name is Shayla Zimmerman, and today we are joined by a food expert to continue our winter resource series with a discussion focused on the power of building partner networks in Washtenaw County that provide food across our communities. A few reminders for today's discussion. We hope to have time for a few questions from the audience, so please put your questions in the chat box on Zoom or into the comments section on Facebook. And closed captions are enabled in Zoom and Facebook. To turn them on, please click the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen. So we all know that food is one of our most basic human needs, but for many across our communities, access can be difficult to navigate during the winter months due to extreme weather patterns that exacerbate inaccessibility. In fact, 40% of Michigan households can't afford this basic resource in today's economy. And this makes accessing food even more of a challenge for those who are already experiencing financial instability or don't have access to adequate transportation. Today, we are joined by a community food expert who will discuss the importance of food rescue during the winter months. I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today, Markell Miller. Since 2013, Markell has served as the Director of Food Programs at Food Gatherers. In her day-to-day, she is responsible for the food bank's partnerships with partner agencies, direct service programs, outreach, nutrition, and health initiatives, research and evaluation, and policy advocacy. Before moving to Michigan, Markell worked in public health, nutrition research, and policy advocacy in California. And prior to that, she was a pastry chef. She has her master's degree of public health from the University of California, Berkeley, and her bachelor's degree of engineering from Stanford University. Welcome, Markell. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Excited to hear more about Food Gatherers.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here as well. Thanks everyone joining or watching this stream. I'm excited to go through a little bit about Food Gatherers. I know we've been serving Washtenaw County for about 35 years, but we're new to some people in the United Way for Southeast Michigan network. So really excited to share a little bit more about us as an organization. You can go to the next slide, please. The graphics are showing up a little funky here, but we'll do our best here. So Food Gatherers is the food bank and food rescue program serving Washtenaw County. We were founded in 1988. There we go. We'll do this and then I'll go back to the other one. Here's a fun picture of our warehouse and our truck with our big carrots. We actually started as a food rescue organization. We were the first in Michigan and the sixth in the country. And we quickly grew and took on additional roles as the food bank. So getting resources and connecting to other streams of support to help neighbors connect to food in our community. We grew, even though at the beginning we were starting out of Zingerman's, which is a famous deli here in Ann Arbor. We grew and got our own warehouse space, and then we built that and then expanded it again. So we operate here in Ann Arbor, but serve Washtenaw County. If you can go to the prior slide. Sorry for jumping around, going out of order here. In our fiscal year ending in 2023, we distributed 7.8 million pounds of food, which is equivalent to 6.5 million meals. And we do that through a network of 140 partner programs. We have calculations, and excuse me, one second. Gotta.
Hi, you're on camera.
So
it's okay. We're all working from home. Thanks,
exactly.
Markell.
Last year, we reached about 56,000 individual neighbors. And so we're able to calculate who we serve through coordination and partnership of all of our amazing organizations that we work with. So we're able to calculate this unique number of individuals served. And so this counts everyone only once, regardless of the number of times they access services. So that was our impact in fiscal year 23. Okay, we can go to the next slide and then the next one. There we go. So here's our model on how we're connecting neighbors to food. We really have a well-established countywide network. I keep referring to Washtenaw County As a food bank, we are have a smaller service area. We just serve Washtenaw County. We are one of 7 regional food banks here in Michigan that are members of Feeding America, the national network of food banks, as well as the Food Bank Council of Michigan, which is our statewide association. So we make sure there's really great coverage throughout our county, and that includes, of course, access in urban areas as well as rural partnerships to make sure that neighbors can get access to food in ways that work for them. We have places that are open throughout the week, throughout the month. We also have a lot of service models available. So this was a great takeaway from COVID. One of the silver linings, of course, to all of the innovation and pivoting that people had to do was figure out different ways to connect neighbors to food. And so it's really wonderful that we're able to offer so many different varieties in service models, recognizing that some neighbors prefer a quick grab and go or a quick drive through. Some neighbors want to shop and select items. Some neighbors just need an extra box of produce, etc. So we have a whole variety of different ways that we can support neighbors in a way that works best for them. And we really have worked a lot, especially in the last few years during COVID, on increasing outreach and visibility, making sure that people could connect to food resources when they needed it, or maybe in advance of needing it, as a little bit of a hint around how you can handle winter planning. A lot of people we serve really only come to a food pantry a few times a year. They're using it to fill in the gaps. Of course, we also serve many people with fixed incomes who are really challenged with finding money in their budget to buy the food they need. And so coming to a pantry is a regular part of how they're getting food. But there are many neighbors who may not ever need us, and this happened during COVID, until there was something extreme that happened to them. And so we want to make sure people know about as a resource before that happens. And the best way that outreach happens is through word of mouth and neighbor to neighbor connection. And so making sure people know how to promote services, how to connect people to services in the ways that work best for them. Okay, next slide. So how do we get food out to the community? It's through all of our partners. Most of our food goes out in the form of groceries to neighbors at food pantries. So these are places passing out groceries. We do some meal programs as well. We support them and we run one. But most of our food goes out through the form of groceries. So we're doing that through a variety of community-based programs, nonprofits, a lot of faith partners. We partner with schools. We also support 2 large pantries at University of Michigan and then Eastern Michigan University for those academic campuses. And then we have several partnerships with health clinics. This photo here is from Maggie's Marketplace at Ypsilanti Health Center, which is a Michigan medicine clinic in Ypsilanti. Food gatherers, in addition to getting food out to a network of nonprofits that we support, we also run our own direct service programs. The biggest one is our community kitchen at Delanis. I'll talk about that in a second. We also run summer food service program in the summer, of course, when school's out. We help try to get free food to kids who would normally be able to get a school meal. We also run the school pantry program at those K-12 schools, and then we have a program called our Neighborhood Grocery Initiative. And this program is decades old. It started before we even had our warehouse because we were trying to connect that fresh, perishable stuff we were rescuing that was still safe to eat to neighbors at affordable housing communities as a way to make it easier for them to get access to food. Okay, next slide, please. So here's a little bit about our community kitchen. This is at the Delanis Center. So the Delanis Center is a county-owned building, but there's a couple of tenants in the building. One is the Shelter Association, and they run the shelter services, both residential and non-residential, for neighbors experiencing homelessness. We staff and operate the kitchen there, the community kitchen, so it's a great volunteer opportunity. Those free meals are open to the public, including shelter residents, as well as anyone from the community that wants to come in for a free meal. And so we've been operating there since the building opened in 2003, and we did not close during the pandemic. So we, as indicated in this picture here, converted to grab and go meals so people could take food off site. We're back to dine-in services. However, we do support a lot of off-site programs in coordination with the shelter that are, recuperative programs for people that have been released from the hospital. There's people that are staying in hotels because we need that right now for overflow shelter for families. So we do a lot of extra kind of supplemental programming to connect neighbors to food. Next slide, please. And then a little bit more about Neighbor Serve. So again, we are able to calculate our impact in terms of the number of people we're reaching. Not only are we calculating the numbers of people, but we're understanding how they're accessing services. So we're able to separate out both unique people served, counting everyone once, regardless of the number of times we serve them, as well as understanding those total service visits. How frequently are people accessing services? And those are really important distinctions to help us understand how neighbors are accessing services. We're also able to get demographic data from neighbors if they're willing to share that with us. And that helps us understand, are we matching the needs in the community and responding to the different populations who need support. So as I mentioned, we reach about 56,000 individuals. But if you count everyone in the household, every time that family or that household was served, that's 1 million service visits in fiscal year 23. And so we have what my colleague calls the Big House Barometer. So using the University of Michigan Big House with its capacity, we could, with the number of service visits that our network supported, would fill the capacity of the Big House 9.5 times. So that's more than a season of home games. So it's a really tremendous impact through the partners that we have in the community. Next slide, please. Our real-time data does allow us to get insights in terms of understanding changes in the community and how that may impact neighbors and how they're accessing services. So as we were planning for, we knew that it would be very difficult for individuals receiving SNAP when the extra SNAP, the bonus SNAP, went away in February of 2023. The state of Michigan authorized that extra SNAP the entire time Congress had allowed it, but that program terminated in February of 2023. So that was an average loss of $90 a person for participating households. So we knew that was going to be significant, particularly because the cost of food hadn't gone down. People weren't getting additional supports elsewhere. Housing costs didn't go down. So we knew people were going to need food. And if they were going to get less SNAP, they were likely going to turn to us more frequently in our network. And we saw this in other states. We were planning this carefully. And so just like other states, we saw a gradual increase. So you can see the stair step where the red arrow is moving to the right of the graph, gradual increase as people were struggling to make ends meet with that extra SNAP benefits going away. Of course, this is only impacting those households who participate in SNAP. However, for the large number of people we serve, many of them are eligible, not all, of course. We estimate about 40% of people experiencing food insecurity in Washtenaw County are not eligible for SNAP. So the only place they can turn is to a network supported by food gatherers. So we've seen a dramatic increase here. And these are service visits. So we're seeing a really increase in frequency of visits. So neighbors coming more frequently to get support. Next slide, please. So when we are looking at where our food's coming from, about 55%, this is fiscal year 23 numbers, comes from donated food. And the primary source of donated food is food rescue, but it also includes food we're getting from farms in Michigan, food that's coming in through food drives, food that's coming to us donated. We have pretty much maximized out the amount of food we can rescue, though, from our service area of Washtenaw County. The yellow apple there is the federal resources. This is a program for food banks and other emergency hunger relief providers called TFAP. Federal resources does not include SNAP because those funds don't come to us. Those goes to neighbors and then they go to grocery stores. So federal resources is a direct funding from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to support hunger relief. And then that tomato in the middle is purchased food. So for fiscal year 24, we are planning on purchasing even more food than we did in fiscal year 23. And that was even greater than what we had done during the pandemic, because during the pandemic, we were getting a lot of resources from the federal government to respond to the increase in hunger in our community. And that has not been sustained, and we can't increase the amount of food we're rescuing. So in order to keep up with demand, we are purchasing more food, which we can do for short term, but is challenging to sustain that over time. Next slide, please. So there are advocacy opportunities, just like United Way, Food Gatherers does advocacy. We educate our elected officials and make sure they understand how hunger impacts our communities and how federal resources and state resources impact both neighbors and food banks. If you want to learn more about our work, you can go to foodgatherers.org/advocate. One of our biggest priorities for 2024 is, of course, the Farm Bill, working closely with Senator Sabanow's team and others across the country to make sure there's opportunities to strengthen SNAP and improve it if possible, at the very least protect it to make sure those resources are going to neighbors who are participating. And we're also advocating for increased funding for TFAP so we can keep up with demand that we foresee being sustained for a while. As we saw with the Great Recession, for neighbors with lower incomes, the economic recovery does not reach them very quickly. And so we want to make sure we have the resources necessary to respond for the coming years. And then next slide. And then just a reminder about getting the word out. Everyone in your role, whether it's personal or professional, has the ability to help connect people to food resources. In addition to, of course, 211, we have a tool on our website that is filterable, searchable. You can look at it by a map or calendar view, and it shows you which pantries or meal programs are open. The nice thing about this tool on our website is our team will update it if a pantry calls and says, hey, we're closed today because of a snow day. We'll get on our website. Still, of course, encourage people to call ahead because things can change before a pantry calls us. But we try to keep our website super duper up to date with those last minute closures as well. Okay, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you so much, Markell. That was a great information about food gatherers and food networks. I particularly love the tool that you have on your website. I was playing with it yesterday and was able to find, food in my area, and that was really cool to see and experience. So I encourage everyone to take a look at that. So we do have a few questions for you and for our audience. If you're watching on Facebook or Zoom, please add your questions in the chat and we will do our best to get to them. So we did get one question in the chat. So a question about food rescue. Could you explain what food rescue is? And if a local restaurant wanted to get involved, how could they get involved with food rescue?
Sure. So food rescue is the idea that you are rescuing, capturing some food that's still safe and nutritious, and then connecting it to another use, in our case, a neighbor who may be experiencing food insecurity. So most of our food rescue is through food retailers, grocery stores who are selling groceries. And the advantage for that is it's already packaged, it's already labeled. So that way when we're passing out this box of cereal, the neighbor knows what's in it, allergens, things like that. Most of our food goes out in the form of groceries, so having those household packaged groceries are really helpful. Food rescue for restaurants is a little bit different. Restaurants often don't have, like here's a 25-pound. I mean, first of all, they have different packaging so that instead of having 1-pound boxes of pasta, they're going to have a 25-pound case of pasta, which we'd be happy to receive. We then can handle repacking of that. But a restaurant often isn't going to have that. They have really nice planning. They don't want to waste their resources, right? That costs them money. And so they often don't have that. They may have leftover, ranch, for example, and it's up to the restaurant to decide if it's worth the kind of time and resources to donate that to us. We have information on our website about donations. If it is a licensed kitchen and the food hasn't been served to the public, of course, all the time and temperature controls must be in place. There are scenarios where we can take the food, but we need to be able to tell the neighbor what's in the food. And so the restaurant would have to be able to tell us what the ingredients and allergens are.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense that you want to keep everything safe, of
Yeah.
course, and good for our neighbors. Thank you for sharing that and explaining what food rescue is. And we did have another question for you to kind of explain. Hunger is so complex. And I was wondering, what is the difference between hunger and food insecurity?
Absolutely. So we use those terms interchangeably, but they're really different kind of situations here. So food insecurity is more of a household or economic social condition where a family or an individual doesn't have enough money to buy the food that they need to be healthy. And food insecurity can be a really kind of a short temporary thing. It can be cyclical. People don't have to be, experiencing food insecurity every day to live under that shadow of food insecurity. And so food insecurity has a lot of stress, a lot of coping mechanisms and trade-offs that can come with it, and a lot of negative health impacts, even though it's more of an economic circumstance for that household or individual. Hunger is really more of a physiological thing where someone is not consuming adequate nutrition. Um, and that can certainly accompany food insecurity. A lot of people experiencing food insecurity struggle with that, even if they don't get to the place where I didn't eat today, although that definitely does happen for people. But they're kind of overlapping situations that an individual may face.
Absolutely. Thank you for explaining that too. And we did get another question in the chat about cooking classes. So, does Food Gatherers offer cooking classes, or do you partner with anyone that might? And do you see a need for that in your community?
Food Gatherers does not do cooking classes. However, there are quite a few partners locally in Washtenaw County that do. There are other organizations that do Cooking Matters or do other community cooking classes for neighbors. This definitely comes up as an interest. I think a lot of people know, what's good for them. They know what the healthier choices are. I think for a lot of neighbors who are struggling, with unstable housing or multiple employment or kids in school, it's often an issue of time and managing time and resources and kind of conflicting priorities, trying to figure out how to get it all done in a day, as I'm sure we can all appreciate. So a lot of times people are more interested in, and more of their questions are rather, how do they meal plan in a way that stretches stuff? There's efficiencies. How do they store things safely? How do they use leftovers? Things like that, as opposed to like, kind of healthy eating basics. I think a lot of people know some of those nuts and bolts of healthy eating.
Yeah.
But that said, it's trying to figure out how to make it all work. I think another need that we've seen is how to maximize um, access to a pantry and how to then use that as a way to stretch your SNAP
Mm,
dollars or your personal dollars. Pantries are really limited in what they're able to offer neighbors, and we are also limited in what we're able to offer pantries. And so recognizing that a pantry can't have everything for everyone. What is going to be helpful at the pantry? What can you get at a pantry that'll let you stretch your dollars, and then you can go to the grocery store. So that sort of kind of meal planning, grocery planning is helpful as.
yeah. That's really helpful. Thank you, Markell. And so it sounds like it's more about practical information and how to use the food that you get, or how to stretch your food.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'll just jump in real quick. One other thing we've done, this is kind of a big project 5 years leading up to COVID, and then COVID kind of paused everything. But we have done what we call our healthy pantry conversion project. So we supported probably about 20 pantries and doing like a healthy remodel. So they had produce display stand, they had little pick kind of cards like, hey, put some, raisins and nuts in your oatmeal, little things like that. And that way we had nudges in the pantry, cues and tips
very
and things
cool.
like that, so that those pantry environments supported those healthy choices, if that's what the neighbor was looking for, or supported, a nutritionist being on site if that was the best fit for that pantry.
Mm. Very great. Thank you, Markel. And that kind of leads me into a few more questions about during times of severe weather. So, we just had snow, we have fog today here in Detroit. Do you have any tips on making someone's food supply last longer? Or how can we prepare for upcoming, extreme weather, especially in the
Yeah,
winter?
of course, it's super tricky, and then also balancing out, power outages and all that stuff. So I
Mhm.
think one thing that I'll lead with is, a lot of people we serve may not regularly be going to pantries, but know about them. And so thinking about, hey, do I have some canned stuff, some non-perishable things, just in case the power goes
Mm,
out, like I have some backup stuff. And that's where, a visit to a pantry could be really helpful there. So you're not using your resources, but you can go to a pantry and get that in advance. And so maybe you're not going to a pantry weekly. That's not necessarily something you need right now, but you have those resources in place. If you do experience a power outage, and you participate in SNAP, sometimes people are eligible for a replacement SNAP, but you can also go to a pantry, and even if that's not something you normally do because you're able to make ends meet, we want to be there for people. So just a little bit of kind of looking ahead, knowing that's often hard, but thinking about how a pantry could be a resource in planning, for not being able to get to a pantry or the grocery store for a few days because of severe weather, etc.
Yeah, that's great. And really helpful too to think about as we are in the winter months too. A lot of food banks, you probably know this, Miguel, but a lot of food banks see like a heightened need for food during winter. So what are some ways that food banks can prepare for the heightened need in the wintertime?
Yeah, so we're constantly, looking ahead and trying to keep one step ahead, a couple months ahead of demand and making sure we have the food on hand. We encourage our pantries to also have a variety of products available and on hand and kind of be prepared. Even if they have a just-in-time model where they're bringing in food and passing it out that day, trying to have a little extra non-perishables on hand. That way, if someone does show up and you're starting to run low at your food pantry or food distribution, you can still make sure the neighbors get something. In addition to being prepared to give that neighbor information about other resources in the community. So maybe your pantry ran out of milk, but having a flyer ready to go, like, hey, this place is open tomorrow, that can be really helpful and take some of the burden off the neighbor.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that leads me to another question about why or what should you do if the nearby food pantry is closed due to the weather?
Yeah, unfortunately, that happens. Our pantry volunteers and staff need to, be safe as well. And so sometimes you have to just call around or wait a day. If a place is closed, that's
Yeah,
just sometimes the reality of things. Of course, if anyone ever finds themselves in a medical emergency, of course, take appropriate action and call your doctor or 911, et cetera. But if a pantry is closed, you're going to have to look. If it's business hours, you can call food gatherers and we can help figure out if another place is open that day and if you're able to travel, or if there is another place open the next day that you can make plans for.
absolutely. Yes. And 211's a good resource for that as well, if something were to happen. And I want to shift our conversation a little bit to policy and getting involved. As you were talking about the Farm Bill, we did get a question about how can you support the Farm Bill as a community member? What are some ways to get involved to make sure that food is more accessible to neighbors?
Absolutely. So, I mean, you can always sign up for updates and alerts from us or from United Way, Feeding America. There's all sorts of national groups, but honestly, what elected officials just they value most is hearing directly from neighbors and directly from community organizations that see this day in, day out. And so, share your story. You don't even necessarily need to know what that policy specific line is. Just say, here's what I'm seeing every day. I have and doing your best to connect opportunities where neighbors can then tell their own stories. So say you have someone who has this very specific story and they want to share it, capture it in a little video message and send it off to your elected official's office. Capture it in written form and send it off to them. I mean, the elected officials want to and need to know how their policy decisions impact our local communities, neighbors, as well as your community organizations. And so it's just there's
Absolutely.
really great opportunity there to help connect those stories and impact to elected officials.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Markel. And thank you so much for being here with us today, leading our community and driving those networks. Really appreciate all the work that you do at Food Gatherers.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed being here today and happy to connect with anyone.
Yeah,
I see some chat. People are checking out our website. So yeah, lots of information on our website. Please follow us on social media too. We've got a great colleague who shares posts and kind of community partner highlights on all of the social media channels. And people can email if they have questions as well.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Markel. So before we close, I do have a few updates for our audience. As a reminder for anyone in our community who may be experiencing a need, such as a food need, our 211 helpline remains available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This includes resources like food, utility assistance, and much more. We always maintain a running list of available services in the community and can connect you to the support that you need. You can also look up resources in your area by using 211 resource database at unitedwaysem.org/211. April is Global Volunteer Month, and our volunteer engagement team is seeking to provide 10 mini grants up to $1,000 to support volunteer project supplies to nonprofit and community organizations through Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties. Grant applications are due this Friday, January 26th by 5 p.m. So if you are interested in applying for that, or you want to hear more about upcoming funding opportunities, please visit unitedwaysem.org/grants hub. And lastly, our next What's the Word Wednesday Town Hall will be next Wednesday on January 31st. We will focus on the Michigan Earned Income Tax Credit for working families, and we want to make sure that you have the information you need to receive your tax credit. We will be joined by our very own Megan Tybus, Director of Community Impact Innovation from United Way for Southeastern Michigan. Be sure to tune in for that town hall and more coming up. To stay updated on our upcoming topics and watch replays of previous town halls, please visit unitedwaysem.org/virtual town halls. Thank you, everyone. Stay warm and continue to live united.